Hello again. Now we're going to look at Tom's timetable. Remember that a timetable shows us times and days that a person does certain activities. Let's look at what Tom does during his week. From 8:30 to 12:30, Tom always attends class. See, he does it every day. He always attends class. And from 2:00 to 3:00, Tom always eats lunch. Every day at this time, he always does that. From 3:00 to 5:00, Tom usually takes a nap. But after his nap, he does some different things. From 6:30 to 8:30, Tom sometimes goes to the gym. See, he goes to the gym 2 times a week. Not every day, but sometimes. And sometimes he plays tennis from 6:30 to 8:30. But he rarely talks with his mother, and he rarely goes to the movies. But Tom always has dinner at 9:00. He never has dinner at 5:00 because he usually does his homework from 5:00 to 6:30. Did you hear how I used these words? Always, usually, often, sometimes, rarely, or even never? Well, these are words that help us to describe how many times a person does an action in a certain period of time. I said, Tom always attends class from 8:30 to 12:30. Tom sometimes goes to the gym, but Tom rarely goes to the movies, and he never has dinner at 1:00. What did these words mean? Well, always means that a person does an action very much or a lot, like 100% of the time. Usually is a little less than always, but it still means that a person does an action quite a lot, or 90% of the time. Like Tom usually does his homework in the afternoons, but maybe one day his teachers don't give him homework. So on that day, he doesn't do his homework, but usually he does his homework then. Often is a little less than usually. It means a person does an action like 70% of the time. Not a lot, but not very little, just often in the middle. Sometimes is a word that means a person does an action a little less, like maybe only 1, 2, or 3 times, or 50% of the time. Tom sometimes goes to the gym because he only goes 1 or 2 times a week. Rarely is a word that means a person does an action very little. Like Tom rarely goes to the movies in the evenings. Never is a word that means that a person does an action 0 times, or they don't do an action. Like Tom never has dinner at 1 o'clock in the afternoon? Now, we use this question, how often, to ask about how many times a person does an action. So if we hear, how often, then we want to try and use some of these words. For example, how often does Tom attend class from 8:30 to 12:30? He always attends class. How often does Tom play tennis? Well, Tom sometimes plays tennis. How often does Tom have dinner at 1 o'clock in the afternoon? He never has dinner at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. So now it's time to try the exercise. You want to use the timetable to make sentences about Tom's daily routines. For example, here we have Tom attends class from 8:30 to 12:30. So we look at the timetable and we see, Tom attends class every day, 100%. So does Tom never, always, or often do this? Well, you decide. It's time to try the exercise. Good luck!